that was the funny part of that whole gang thing, was those guys were just absolutely at the very bottom.
Imagine if Ajax got a hold of those guys, though. It's better that they ran away, because if those dudes got a hold of them, oh my gosh, it would have been bloodfest.
Yeah, these guys the Warriors were just ready, man. They were just, those are street fighters. Those guys were, coming out of Coney Island. They weren't putting up with any bullshit. So
yeah, if you look at the gang, you had Swan who could fight, Ajax could fight, Cleon could fight, Snow was just kind of the nice, sensitive kid, right? Snow could fight too. Yeah,
Cowboy got his ass kicked by the baseball Furies.
He did redeem himself in the bathroom, though.
Yes.
Yeah, and then Cochise and Snow could fight. Rembrandt was the chill kid. Rembrandt was like the nice, sensitive gang member, but he still threw some punches. And then Fox, we never see.
He spray painted, guys in the face. So I mean, he was using his paint cans as weapons. So
exactly. And then Vermin could brawl, but he got body slammed into a mirror in that bathroom fight. But so what's funny? He was supposed to be killed by the Lizzies, but he purposely made himself more funny, his character more funny.
Yeah. So he was kind of. He was a comic relief.
But he was dropping some bombs on those, I don't know, the rugby overall guys. Those rugby overall guys were pretty tough, though. That was a solid scrap that they had. Swan got rocked in there, and that was probably their biggest. They were tougher than the Furies, I would say.
I think they had. Oh, I read that was the only set they had to build.
Wow.
Yeah, the bathroom scene was the only actual set they built. Everything else was filmed in New York. But I read somewhere that was the only actual set that they built was for that scene, for the bathroom scene. And it was a tough fight. Close quarter bathroom stalls. Yeah.
And so they had to get tough PAs to work on it, because people were just thinking I'm New York. And so they would try to bust through and step on set. So the PAs on set had to be able to rumble a little bit. The production assistants to keep people away.
Anyway, all the extras, the Turnbull ACs, those are all extras. And apparently when they went to like food trucks to eat, people ran away from them in fear because they just looked like the real thing, like just a bunch of skinhead fucks.
Yeah, I love that line by Ajax. Oh, that was so cool. When James Remar says that.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
So I got something interesting here. Cleon was supposed to be killed by the Gramercy Riffs. Cochise is killed by the Baseball Furies. Ajax is caught by the police. Vermin is killed by the Lizzies. And did you hear about Swan's? Side plot where he gets kidnapped by the Dingoes? Have you heard about that?
Yes, it was a homosexual band, leather gang or. Yeah. I don't know that would have gone over very well.
No.
I'm glad they didn't. They decided not to film that. That would have ended up like the scene from oh God.
It would have played so wrong, and it would have played very backwards for sure. And I'm glad that didn't happen.
Yeah, no, it would have been like that geek scene in Pulp Fiction.
Oh yeah.
It would have been really uncomfortable to watch. So
I got to tell you though, one other thing I love about this movie, and I love that you suggested it. This is a short movie, Dave. This is not a long movie. This is 90 minutes.
Yeah, hour and a half, something like that.
You're in and out, and there's nothing better than that.
No, it's solid. I mean, these are all young first-time actors. I mean, literally, I think a few had been in a stage play or something, but this was first-time actors, and they were solid. I mean, every character was interesting to watch. Everybody had a specialty, but I'll tell you who really knocked this thing out of the park was David Patrick Kelly, who plays Luther.
Oh yeah, he crushed that.
Oh my God, he was. This must have actually kind of hurt his career. Just like I wanted to say, the Spicoli character from Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Yeah.
I mean, he had that same. He was too good in that role. It was one of these things where apparently he had been in a play with, I want to say it was Sigourney Weaver, and Walter Hill saw the play. He was in Israel, I believe. Walter Hill saw the play and liked him, and then he already had the hair, and so Walter Hill was like, "Don't cut your hair." So I mean, he had the look down.
Oh, wait, are you talking about Swan or Luther?
Luther.
Okay.
So David Patrick Kelly.
Got it.
Who, by the way, any John Wick fans out there, David Patrick Kelly plays Charlie the Cleaner. in the John Wick movies. So he's gone on to do, really great stuff too. But
got it. That's why I got confused, because Luther, he was in New York when they saw him, and then Michael Beck was the one in Israel with Sigourney Weaver. He played Swan. That's why I got all the sorts. My bad.
No, I must have it backwards then. But apparently it got to the point where Walter Hill felt so comfortable with David Patrick Kelly that he needed him to taunt the Warriors in that wharf scene, and so David Patrick Kelly came up with that bottle clanking. He said it was based on a neighbor of his that always taunted him when he was growing up, but he on the fly he came up with that Warriors come out to play, and it's perfect. It's so crazy. It's so over the top. It's scary. It just proved he was not right in the head. He was crazy. Even that one line where somebody asked him, why are you doing this? He goes, I just like doing stuff like this. just the way he delivered the lines was just amazing. He goes, I'm having a great time. Oh, he was crazy. He's so good in that movie, but
he adds that menace. I mean, he adds that. What I like about him is he adds that wild card vibe that you need.
Oh no, he was a powder keg. Mm-hmm. You didn't know where, what was happening. And in the last scene where Swan and him fight when they finally hit Coney Island, the beach in Coney Island. I felt robbed, but that scene reminded me. Did you ever see The Magnificent Seven?
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay, there's a scene in there where James Coburn has a switchblade. He's known for being really good with a switchblade, and there's some kind of bet going on with this other cowboy that, he's saying that James Coburn can beat him in a draw against a gun. And that scene where it's Coburn with a switchblade against a cowboy with a six-shooter, and Coburn wins. James Coburn wins. And then they do it for real because, the cowboy wasn't satisfied, and he kills him before he has a chance. That's the same scene in that Warriors where Swan throws the switchblade right before Luther shoots the gun. So it's feasible in movie world that worked, but it was such a letdown because I really wanted them just to beat the living shit out of those guys because they deserved it, man.
I guess what the problem is, we had never seen Swan with a knife before. So maybe in the beginning, if we saw him doing some tricks with it, and then someone said, we can't bring knives, man. And so he puts the knife down, does that make sense? But at the end, he just pulls out a blade and he's throwing that thing like nothing. It did feel rushed. But
yeah, you're right. They were always grabbing, for weapons of any sort. Like they stole the Baseball Fury bats, or picking up pieces of pipes, broken bottles. So all of a sudden he's got a switchblade. Yeah. It was, oh yeah, I had this all along. I forgot.
That dude looked the part though, man. Swan. So you and I watch a lot of movies. How often do you just fully believe that a character is a badass? I believe that this gang, these guys were badasses. I bought into Swan. I bought into Cochise. I bought into Ajax. Yeah. I believe that they could just beat up the Baseball Furies, the rollerblading guys. I knew they could wipe out the orphans.
No, they looked the part. They looked like they had a tough life. I mean, they came out of Coney, and it looks like, and they fought and scrapped their way,
And what a simple plot. Isn't it beautiful? Sorry to interrupt, Dave. Sorry, man. Isn't it just a beautifully simple plot? And that's what I love, man.
Well, wasn't it? I read somewhere where Walter Hill did this based on a Greek mythology.
Yep.
Something called the Battle of Cunaxa.
Yep, and 10,000 Greek warriors had to fight their way for 1,000 miles
back to their home.
Yep, forced march.
So I mean, it has that Greek mythology kind of quest of impossible odds to get home. I mean, you had to battle your way, and it just had some great one-liners in it, like
it does.
Can you dig it? Mm-hmm. Can you count, suckers? And the very last line that Swan says in the movie when they get home just kind of summed it up. And he said, this is what we were fighting to get back home to. This is what we fought all night to get to. That was such a great, it's like they grew up.
Yeah.
They grew up at night, and they get back to their home turf, and he's looking at Coney Island and he goes, this is what we fought all night to get to. And they had just had a realization that this is not the life that I want. So they all grew up overnight. I mean, they literally realized that what they were doing wasn't worth getting yourself killed. And so it had a redemption on it. But yeah, they all grew overnight. And I guess you could say they became adults and realized that this was a waste of their time. But I'll tell you, there were a couple of really great scenes that were just very nuanced. Do you remember when they were going home finally and they're on the subway and the prom couples come in?
Yeah, I love that.
And they're all dressed up in beautiful dresses and tuxedos. And then there's Swan and Mercy, filthy, covered in dirt and mud and just torn clothes and beat to shit. And they're sitting across this beautiful young prom couple. And you see Mercy reach up to adjust her hair because she was embarrassed about the way she looked. And you see Swan grab her hand and gently pull it down like, fuck those guys. It's not worth it. We are better than them. And it was a touching moment. And I think that was the point where I think Swan and Mercy became a couple. I think that was, I mean, he was protecting her and he was telling her at the same time that don't be ashamed of who you are. You know, and it was very simple. It was just a simple gesture, and it was just a look. And then at that point, they flash back to the prom couple, and they all look like, we need to get off this train now. So they like run out of the train and leave them. But God, what a great scene on that.
And then he gives her the corsage.
Then he gives her the corsage that was dropped on the floor. He gives it to her. So yeah, that was a touching moment. Probably really tough for Swan because he didn't look like kind of guy that was, going to be romantic. So that was kind of his gesture of romance on that.
Yeah, they had such good chemistry on set. They just paired them up. It was supposed to be her and Fox, but then they weren't popping. So you could see the scenes where Fox is supposed to have like Swan's like, hey, Fox, come with me. And then Fox is running with her at that scene, and they were supposed to go on their own adventure. Walter Hill just hated weights, and they've made up, like they're buds now. Yeah, it's pretty interesting how this movie had to change on the fly. But I tell you, man, just like Mad Max Fury Road, we just talked about that. Just they leave the Citadel, they come back to the Citadel. In the Warriors, they leave Coney Island, they come back to Coney Island. I love that, and in the beginning, it shows how long the subway trip is. Like I don't understand this, I don't know what to do here, so it shows how long the journey is to get to where they're going.
That goes back to you and I did a Sorcerer podcast, and it's the same thing with the odometer on the truck.
Yes.
That you needed to see how far they were going to have to go on their journey, what it looked like, and how close they're going to get, to their destination. So those were important. Yeah, the subway maps were important for them to, determine how far their journey was going to be.
And I'm so happy I didn't work on this movie, Dave. They had an AD quit, and then they brought in a California first AD who they thought wasn't tough enough for New York. But then he went and proved himself. But did you hear the kind of how they set up the massive gang scene? Did you listen to that section of the interviews? How they did that in the beginning?
I don't remember
I got it. The AD was smart enough to set up a God mic, which means the mics were everywhere. So so he didn't have to stand in the middle of them and scream. They just had microphones everywhere so that the gangs would listen. And they said, and it actually kept people under control because there are actually different gangs there.
So I did read something where Walter Hill, they had him do an inner circle, a middle circle, an outer circle, and they were all supposed to run counterclockwise to each other.
Yep.
So every other circle was going in an opposite direction. So that was the one thing I remember hearing about was the direction to make that scene look chaotic. It actually was controlled chaos.
They did but imagine how, Dave, we've dealt with crowds before. They had to deal with gang members at night, and somehow they pulled it off. And it's really interesting, too. When is a movie that you can think about that has the biggest set piece in the beginning?
Wow.
Right? Isn't that they did something pretty daring here. I just thought that was pretty interesting that from the rest of the film, it only gets smaller. If you think about it, so they're out in the open, right? And they have their massive, they deal with the orphans out in the open, and then they get chased by the Turnbulls, and they have the fight in the park. But then it goes to the bathrooms, and then it goes to the subways. It's pretty interesting how they sort of narrowed it down.
And it ends up on a beach, a real big open, area. Yeah. So it kind of goes back to the open area on that. So yeah, interesting take on that. I did read, and I don't know how true this is, that apparently they were going to get Orson Welles to do narration at the beginning.
Yeah, they tried.
How weird was that? It was. It kind of reminds me of how pissed off I think Harrison Ford was to have to go back and do narration for Blade Runner.
Oh, goodness gracious,
because apparently the movie execs didn't think it made any sense, and so now you got to add narration to it, and so that was I can imagine that was the only reason why somebody was thinking that, well, yeah, we got to have some narration here to create some kind of backstory for these guys, and I'm glad they didn't do it. It would have been interesting to have Orson Welles narrate the beginning of the movie, but
an eighth of their budget probably too, just to get him.
Well, this movie didn't do real well, but
it's not its fault.
Well, it also got, much like Clockwork Orange, it got pulled because of the violence. It got pulled out of the movie theaters, and it wasn't necessarily because it's cartoon violence, not like today, but it was because real gangs were going to the movies to see the